My 60th birthday arrived a day that truly ought to have been bursting with happiness, filled with cheerful moments and joyful celebration. However, instead of ending on a high note of delight and shared warmth, it painfully culminated in a deeply hurtful moment when my daughter-in-law Wendy delivered a cruel and utterly thoughtless blow. She coldly and carelessly labeled me a useless burden. Her incredibly harsh and dismissive words, spoken right in the middle of what was supposed to be a wonderfully happy and festive occasion, wounded me profoundly, cutting deep into my heart and my sense of self-worth. In the quiet, stunned aftermath of that truly terrible evening, after all the forced smiles and strained goodbyes had finally faded, a complex wave of intense anger mixed with a powerful instinctual sense of self-preservation washed over me. My immediate and incredibly decisive response, born from that potent mix of hurt and determination, was to take back control of a specific situation she clearly, undeniably took completely for granted. I made the firm decision to immediately freeze the very bank account she and my son Mark relied upon month after month to cover their significant mortgage payments. I am sharing this deeply personal experience, this raw and honest account of that difficult time with you now, in the hope that perhaps it might resonate with your own life, or offer some valuable perspective on navigating complex family dynamics and finding your voice. Thank you sincerely for choosing to join me on this challenging journey. Please stay with my story and listen to it until the very end as it unfolds. As you kindly lend your ear, I invite you to consider leaving a comment down below, perhaps telling me which city or town you are listening or watching from today. It would honestly mean a tremendous amount to me, touching my heart deeply, to see just how far my personal story, my experience of overcoming this pain, has reached across the globe, and to feel a connection with people from so many different places. I honestly, in my wildest dreams, never could have possibly imagined or predicted that my momentous 60th birthday, such a significant and meaningful milestone in my life, would ultimately conclude with me huddled alone, feeling utterly heartbroken and vulnerable in the small, cramped space of my bathroom, with hot tears silently streaming down my face. The cruel sting of my daughter-in-law Wendy's harsh and utterly dismissive assessment of me, that I was nothing more than a useless burden, echoed relentlessly and persistently in the suffocating quiet of the small space, each individual syllable of her terrible phrase feeling like a fresh, stinging wound inflicted upon my already fragile heart. For weeks, even months leading up to that specific day, I had poured all of my energy and love into meticulously planning every single detail of the upcoming celebration. My only simple desire, my sole focus, was for absolutely everything to be perfect, a warm, inviting, and undeniably loving gathering of the people who meant the most to me. I had carefully arranged delicate fresh flowers throughout my modest apartment, their beautiful fragrance gently filling the air, creating a sense of calm and natural beauty. I spent countless hours standing in my kitchen, lovingly preparing all of my son Mark's most cherished and favorite foods, including, of course, his absolute favorite, a rich, decadent chocolate cake. I baked it from scratch just precisely the way he vividly remembered it, from his happy childhood days, carefully following the old family recipe, hoping with all my heart to evoke warm, happy memories for him. The early part of the evening itself unfolded beautifully, feeling light and full of my genuine connection. My son Mark arrived precisely on time with his wife Wendy, and my two wonderful teenage grandchildren, Emma and Tyler. A small, intimate group of my closest, most trusted friends were also there, comfortably filling my rather cramped but undeniably cozy living room. The space felt wonderfully warm and vibrantly alive, buzzing with the cheerful sound of lively conversation, the gentle clinking of glasses, and the genuine sound of heartfelt laughter. For a few precious fleeting moments, I truly allowed myself to feel completely, utterly happy and profoundly surrounded by the love of those important people. Then came the eagerly anticipated time for gifts, a traditional part of any birthday celebration. My thoughtful and incredibly supportive friends presented me with truly lovely personal presents, a wonderfully soft cashmere scarf in a beautiful shade of calming blue, a very generous gift card to my absolute favorite independent bookstore, a place I adored spending hours in, and an elegant bottle of expensive, delightfully fragrant perfume that smelled simply wonderful. When I carefully unwrapped Mark's gift, I was genuinely surprised and deeply touched, feeling a warmth spread through my chest to find a beautifully bound travel journal, its crisp, blank pages looking incredibly inviting, filled with the promise of future adventures. "Mom," Mark said, his voice gentle, and his smile radiating warmth, appearing completely genuine and sincere. "I know how much you've always dreamed of exploring the world, seeing new places, and experiencing different cultures." He paused, his eyes holding mine. "Maybe it's finally time you actually started mapping out those incredible trips you and Dad always lovingly dreamed about, taking together all those years ago." His simple, heartfelt words brought a sudden emotional lump to my throat, a complex mixture of deep gratitude for his thoughtfulness and a bittersweet wave of memories of my late husband, Harold. My heart literally swelled with a powerful rush of emotion at his incredible thoughtfulness and the understanding he showed. For many long years, ever since my beloved husband, Harold, had tragically passed away 5 years prior, I had deliberately and consciously put aside my own personal aspirations, my dreams, and my desires. My primary focus, my sole purpose, had been entirely on supporting Mark and his growing family in absolutely any way that I possibly could. A significant and undeniably concrete example of this unwavering support was my decision to sell the comfortable family home that Harold and I had so lovingly shared for decades. I consciously used the substantial proceeds from that sale to provide Mark and Wendy with a very substantial down payment for their beautiful, much larger house located comfortably in the suburbs, a place with plenty of room for their growing family. This significant decision meant that I had to relocate myself, moving into the much smaller apartment where I currently resided. What they, Mark and Wendy, clearly didn't know, what I had kept entirely to myself, was that far beyond that initial large down payment, I had been quietly and consistently paying their monthly mortgage from a separate designated account that Harold had specifically left for my personal security and financial well-being after his passing. I was keenly aware that they often struggled financially, finding it difficult to make ends meet, primarily due to Mark's somewhat inconsistent income as an independent contractor and Wendy's more modest earnings from her part-time job. I never ever wanted them to experience the crushing worry or stress of potentially losing their home, of not being able to keep a roof over their heads. "Oh, Mark." I managed to say, my voice a little thick and trembling, with unshed emotion struggling slightly to keep my composure. "I would absolutely love that idea, truly." I paused, taking a small breath. "I've actually been thinking quite a bit recently about perhaps visiting the majestic Grand Canyon this coming summer." A hopeful thought flickered in my mind. Perhaps I could even manage to take the grandkids along for a long weekend trip. That would be absolutely wonderful, wouldn't it? I looked hopefully at Wendy, inviting her into the idea. It was at that precise, seemingly innocent moment that Wendy's entire demeanor and facial expression visibly shifted, changing instantly. Her smile, which had seemed pleasant enough just moments before, became noticeably tight, almost brittle and strained, losing all its warmth. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, a subtle, almost imperceptible change, as she casually took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine, a distinctly calculating and cold look entering them. "Oh, Anna," she said, her voice remarkably sweet, in tone almost saccharine, yet carrying a sharp, cutting edge that sliced through the sudden, stunned silence that had fallen over the room. "Don't be utterly ridiculous, really." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "The children," she continued, her voice dripping with thinly veiled condescension and dismissal, "have carefully planned summer programs already scheduled, and honestly, they are much too busy for unplanned trips." She then added with a cruel twist, "Besides, they really do need proper supervision, not merely unskilled babysitting from someone who appears to barely be able to take care of herself these days." The room immediately fell into a deep, heavy, and incredibly uncomfortable silence. I felt a humiliatingly hot flush creep up my neck and rapidly flood my cheeks, my skin burning with embarrassment and hurt. I stammered, my voice barely a whisper, struggling to find the right words. I thought perhaps it might be a nice opportunity." "And that, Anna?" Wendy pressed on relentlessly, her voice maintaining that dangerously deceptive sweet tone, while her words were as sharp, cold, and painful as carefully aimed knives, each one striking its target. "Is precisely the core of the problem, isn't it?" She leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on mine. "You are perpetually inserting yourself into our lives, constantly acting as though you are still desperately needed or somehow indispensable to our family. Let's be brutally honest here, shall we?" She paused for dramatic effect, letting the tension build. "At this particular point in time, you are simply becoming a useless burden." The silence that followed her cruel and shocking declaration was truly deafening, amplifying the profound shock and deep hurt I felt the words echoing in my ears. My gaze instinctively flew to Mark, my son, my heart desperately hoping, praying with every fiber of my being that he would finally step in and defend me, his own mother, from his wife's vicious attack. But he simply stared fixedly down at his shoes, his face rapidly turning a deep, telltale shade of crimson red, deliberately avoiding my eyes, completely offering no words of defense or comfort. My teenage grandchildren, Emma and Tyler, looked absolutely mortified and deeply uncomfortable by their mother's sudden cruel outburst, shifting nervously in their seats, but they remained completely silent, frozen in place. My friends exchanged uneasy, uncomfortable glances amongst themselves, clearly unsure of how to react or whether to intervene in this incredibly awkward and painful family scene. I think the cake must be ready now." I finally managed to whisper, my voice barely audible, thick with emotion, before quickly escaping the suffocating, hostile atmosphere of the living room and retreating to the relative safety, the quiet solitude of the kitchen. The remainder of the evening passed by in a hazy, disconnected blur of forced smiles, strained conversation, and a pervasive sense of discomfort. Everyone seemed visibly eager to leave as quickly as possible, offering hurried goodbyes and conspicuously avoiding making any kind of eye contact with me. Mark mumbled something vague as he was leaving about needing to talk to Wendy later about her behavior. But deep down I knew the significant damage had already been done. The cruel words spoken were irreversible, impossible to take back. As they were finally leaving my apartment, Wendy didn't even spare me a single glance. Her cold indifference and complete lack of remorse feeling like a final stinging blow. Now perched precariously and uncomfortably on the cold, hard edge of my old bathtub, hot tears streaming uncontrollably and freely down my face, the profound irony and bitter unfairness of the entire situation hit me with full overwhelming force. For 5 long, silent years, I had been the quiet, unseen financial backbone, the invisible support structure, consistently supporting their seemingly comfortable and effortless suburban lifestyle. The substantial monthly mortgage payment for their beautiful 4-bedroom house, a hefty and significant $2,300 every single month, had consistently come directly and reliably from my personal bank account month after month. It was money I had never once mentioned, never asked about, and certainly never demanded anything in return for. These were funds generously left to me by Harold's substantial life insurance policy money. I absolutely could have, and perhaps should have used, entirely for my own comfort, security, and peace of mind in my retirement years. And here I was, 60 years old, celebrating a milestone birthday, being callously labeled a burden by the very woman whose comfortable, seemingly effortless life I had been secretly and quietly financing all this time. Taking a shaky, uneven breath, I reached up and wiped the relentless tears from my face, lifting my head to look at my own distorted reflection in the steamy bathroom mirror. My own mother's wise, strong, and incredibly resilient words came flooding back to me in that moment, clear as a bell echoing in my mind. Anna, never ever let them see they have truly hurt you. With a sudden surge of fierce determination and resolve, I straightened my shoulders, took another deep, fortifying breath, and splashed cold water on my face, attempting desperately to wash away the raw pain, the deep hurt, and the relentless flow of tears. That night, sleep proved to be an impossible luxury, a distant, unattainable dream. My mind raced endlessly and relentlessly, replaying Wendy's cruel and hurtful words over and over, fixating obsessively on the bank account, the automatic steady payments flowing out each month, and the bitter, painful realization of just how completely I had been taken advantage of, how my generosity had been exploited. The intense internal turmoil and emotional distress continued without interruption until the first soft light of dawn began to filter through my small apartment window. By morning, a hard, firm, and absolutely unwavering decision had solidified and settled in my mind, etched there like stone. With hands that still trembled slightly from the emotional strain and lack of sleep, I picked up my phone and called my bank. I spoke clearly and calmly to the representative requesting to immediately and permanently freeze the specific joint account I had specifically set up all those years ago for the sole purpose of conveniently making their mortgage payments for them. "Are you absolutely sure about this decision, Mrs. Collins?" the kind and slightly surprised bank representative inquired gently over the phone, a note of genuine surprise and perhaps concern evident in her voice. "Yes," I stated, my voice coming out stronger and clearer, steadier than I had honestly anticipated it would, surprising even myself. "I am completely, irrevocably sure." I paused, gathering my thoughts. It is time for a significant and necessary change, a fundamental shift. I had no clear idea, not even the faintest inkling of what the immediate or long-term consequences of this drastic action would truly be, what kind of potential storm I was potentially unleashing upon my family. But for the very first time in what felt like countless years, a long, dark period, I felt something stirring deep within me, something I had honestly feared had died, along with my beloved Harold, a fragile but undeniable flicker of my own self-respect and inherent worth was slowly tentatively reawakening. The morning after my utterly disastrous and painfully memorable 60th birthday celebration, I found myself sitting alone at my small, worn kitchen table, the lukewarm cup of tea clutched tightly between my hands, having long since gone completely cold and unappealing. The raw humiliation and deep hurt from the previous evening still felt acutely fresh, a lingering dull ache in my chest that refused to dissipate. Yet alongside the persistent pain and discomfort, something else was slowly but surely beginning to emerge within me, a profound and undeniable sense of clarity and newfound perspective. As incredibly painful and cruel as Wendy's words had undoubtedly been, they had in a strange and unintended way inadvertently served as a harsh, much-needed wake-up call, forcing me to finally confront, truly see, and honestly acknowledge what I had been willfully ignoring, denying, and avoiding for far too long. It hadn't always been this way, not in the very beginning of their relationship. When Mark had first introduced me to Wendy some 15 years ago, she had been undeniably charming, appearing genuinely attentive, and seemingly eager to connect. She had asked me questions about cherished family recipes, with feigned interest eagerly offered to help with preparations for holiday gatherings, and appeared genuinely interested in truly becoming a valued and integrated member of our family. My late husband Harold, however, had harbored subtle reservations about her from the outset. "Something about her just doesn't quite feel right to me, Anna," he'd whispered to me quietly, on more than one private occasion, a look of unease on his face. But I, perhaps unfortunately blinded by my intense desire for my son's ultimate happiness and wanting him to find a good partner, had unfortunately dismissed his valid concerns as merely typical, slightly overprotective behavior from a loving and concerned father. Everything seemed to subtly, almost imperceptibly change after the wedding ceremony. The transformation in Wendy's attitude and behavior was so incredibly gradual, so insidious and cleverly hidden, that I barely even noticed it happening, at first glance. Initially, our once regular and cherished Sunday family dinners, slowly, almost without conscious decision, became less frequent occurrences, changing to monthly gatherings, then dwindling further to quarterly events, and eventually sadly diminishing to whenever they could possibly find the time to fit us into their incredibly busy schedule, becoming less and less of a priority. Wendy consistently had a convenient and readily available excuse. Prepared the children were suddenly too tired for a visit, Mark had unexpected or urgent work commitments that conveniently arose, or she conveniently developed a sudden debilitating headache, just precisely when a visit to my apartment or a dinner together was planned. Whenever I attempted to drop by their house with homemade cookies, a special treat I knew the grandchildren absolutely adored and always looked forward to. Wendy would almost always intercept me right at the front door, before I could even fully step inside. "Oh, the kids just had something sweet a little while ago." Or, "We're actually just heading out right now." Unfortunately, she'd say smoothly, always taking the container of delicious cookies directly from my hands, without ever, not even once, extending an invitation for me to come inside for even a brief moment. Later, Mark would invariably call me, usually late in the evening, to express his thanks for the cookies and my thoughtfulness, but it was always noticeably when Wendy was clearly not around to overhear our conversation, his voice often sounding slightly strained or rushed. After Harold's unexpected and tragic heart attack and subsequent passing 5 years ago, Wendy's subtle control over my life and my access to the children seemed to tighten considerably, becoming more overt and calculated. During those incredibly dark, grief-stricken, and emotionally raw days immediately following the funeral, when all I truly desired, all I needed, was to be surrounded by the comforting presence and loving support of my family, she deliberately limited my time spent with my precious grandchildren. She claimed with what felt like deliberate cruelty that they were far too sensitive to be exposed to such deep grief and sadness, effectively isolating me further in my profound sorrow and preventing me from finding solace in their company. Then came the significant and pressing challenge of their sudden housing crisis. Mark's independent contracting business had unfortunately hit a rough patch and was really struggling financially, leaving them facing the very real and terrifying risk of potentially losing their home through foreclosure. "It's so incredibly embarrassing and humiliating, Mom," Mark confessed to me one late night on the phone, his voice thick with raw emotion cracking slightly under the strain. "I honestly don't know how I'm going to tell the kids that we might actually have to sell the house and move into a small cramped apartment." The solution, at least to me at that specific time, seemed incredibly simple, straightforward, and entirely logical. Harold and I had worked hard together for many years and had, thankfully, paid off our comfortable family home years ago, meaning it was debt-free and a valuable asset. "I'll sell the house, Mark," I told him immediately, without a moment's hesitation, a decision that felt instinctively right to me. "You can use the substantial proceeds from the sale for a significant down payment on a new place, something more manageable for you and your family." I paused, taking a deep breath. "I'll simply find myself a small, cozy apartment to live in." When I shared this significant decision with my closest, most trusted friends, they honestly thought I had completely lost my mind, utterly convinced I was making a terrible mistake. "Anna, that house is your absolute security, your entire nest egg, your future." My dear friend Patricia warned me urgently, her voice filled with genuine concern and alarm. But I simply could not bear the heartbreaking thought of seeing Mark and his family struggling so profoundly, facing homelessness or significant financial hardship. The sale of our beloved family home ultimately provided them with more than enough funds, a substantial amount for a truly significant down payment on a beautiful, spacious, and undeniably expensive house situated in a very upscale and desirable neighborhood. I made the difficult move into my small apartment, consciously trying desperately to convince myself that it was perfectly cozy and manageable, rather than undeniably cramped and a significant downgrade. What I never ever told anyone, not even my closest and most trusted friend Patricia, was that I continued to provide them with significant and ongoing financial support far beyond that initial large down payment. The life insurance money Harold had left me after his passing wasn't an enormous, unimaginable fortune, but it was certainly a substantial and comfortable amount that was explicitly meant to see me comfortably through my retirement years, allowing me to live without financial worry. I quietly and discreetly set up a specific joint bank account in my name and conveniently arranged for the hefty monthly mortgage payment for their new large house to be automatically transferred each and every month directly from my account to theirs. I remember vaguely telling Mark during one brief conversation that this financial support was just until you managed to truly get back on your feet financially, until his business recovered fully. That specific conversation, that seemingly simple promise, had taken place over 4 long years ago. As I continued sitting there alone at my small kitchen table, lost in my thoughts, a flood of painful and unwelcome memories washed over me one after another. I vividly recalled the time Wendy conveniently forgot to invite me to my granddaughter Emma's important dance recital, a significant event in her young life, only to casually show me photos of the event afterward, almost as an afterthought, clearly knowing how much it would hurt me to have missed it. I remembered the Christmas when the thoughtful and carefully chosen gifts I had meticulously wrapped for the children mysteriously got lost, only to be conveniently found weeks later. long after the excitement and magic of the holiday season had completely faded away, rendering them almost meaningless. There was the family vacation to Florida that I was never told about until after they had already returned, tanned and full of exciting detailed stories about their wonderful trip, making me feel completely excluded. My phone suddenly buzzed loudly, interrupting my painful reflections and bringing me back to the present moment. It was Patricia calling me, her name lighting up the screen. "Anna," she said immediately, her voice filled with palpable worry and concern. "Are you all right? I've been absolutely worried sick about you. Ever since I left your place last night after what happened, after what Wendy said." "I'm fine, Patricia," I replied automatically, the deeply ingrained habit of minimizing my pain and emotional distress, kicking in instantly, a defense mechanism I had perfected over years. "No, you're not fine, Anna. Don't tell me that," Patricia stated firmly but gently, refusing to accept my false reassurance. "What Wendy said to you was absolutely cruel, beyond the pale truly awful. And for Mark to just sit there saying absolutely nothing in your defense, I honestly wanted to grab him and just shake some sense into him right there and then. He's caught in the middle, Patricia," I said, automatically and instinctively making excuses for my son's inaction, a habit I had unfortunately perfected and relied upon over decades of motherhood. "Has he even called you to apologize yet?" Patricia asked directly and pointedly, cutting through my excuses. The prolonged silence on my end of the phone provided the unspoken and painful answer to her question. "Anna," she said softly, her voice serious. "We really, really need to talk, truly. Talk openly and honestly about everything you've been doing for them for years, all this time." I felt a tight, anxious knot instantly forming in my stomach, a physical manifestation of my fear and apprehension. I had never confessed the full embarrassing extent of my significant financial support, especially the secret monthly mortgage payments, to anyone, not even to Patricia, before. What exactly do you mean?" I asked evasively, trying desperately to buy myself some time or avoid the difficult conversation altogether. "Anna, I am not blind, and I am certainly not naive," Patricia stated firmly but with kindness and understanding in her voice. "You sold your home, your security, your future, to effectively bail them out of their financial trouble." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You are currently living in that tiny, cramped apartment while they reside comfortably in what amounts to a mini mansion in the suburbs, living a lifestyle they couldn't possibly afford on their own." She took a breath. "And frankly, I strongly suspect, and I am almost certain, that there is even more significant financial support that you haven't told me about, something you've kept hidden." The tears came then suddenly and unexpectedly hot and completely uncontrollable. A dam of suppressed emotion, years of built-up hurt, quiet resentment and unspoken sacrifice finally breaking. Years of holding it all in, of pretending to be fine, poured out of me in a torrent of sobs as I finally completely and honestly confessed everything. The steady monthly mortgage payments, the significant credit card debt I had quietly and discreetly helped them clear even the regular tuition fees for the grandchildren's various private school activities and expensive extracurricular clubs. "Oh, Anna." Patricia sighed softly, her voice filled with deep compassion and understanding, when I finally finished my tearful, raw confession, wiping my eyes. "My dear friend, you have essentially been their personal bank for years, acting as a constant source of funds, while Wendy has been treating you like nothing more than an unwelcome, inconvenient guest in their lives, someone to be tolerated, not cherished. I just desperately wanted to help them. I whispered, my voice thick and choked with lingering emotion and sadness. Anna helping family is one thing, a good and noble thing, Patricia said firmly but gently. But being deliberately and consistently taken advantage of, being exploited and manipulated, is something else entirely. Something profoundly wrong. She was absolutely right, of course. Deep down, I knew she was. For far too many years, I had tragically confused true self-sacrifice, genuine acts of love and support, with genuine love itself, tragically mistaking blatant exploitation and manipulation for necessary family duty and obligation. I thought about the bank account I had decisively frozen just that morning, a significant first step towards reclaiming my autonomy and sense of self. It was a necessary act, a line drawn in the sand, but I knew with absolute certainty that there would be consequences, difficult and potentially painful ones. My phone buzzed right then, vibrating on the table with an incoming text message from Mark. It simply read, "Mom, is everything okay with the bank account? I just got a really weird call about the mortgage payment not going through today." The inevitable storm, the confrontation I had been unconsciously avoiding for years, the reckoning had officially begun, and it was now completely unavoidable. I stared intently at Mark's text message on my phone screen for what felt like an absolute eternity, the words blurring slightly through the residue of my tears. My fingers hovered nervously over the reply button, utterly uncertain and overwhelmed, unsure of how to even begin to craft a response, how to explain everything in a simple text message. One part of me, the deeply ingrained part that had spent decades prioritizing everyone else's needs, feelings, and comfort, far, far above my own, instinctively wanted to type out a quick, apologetic message, to immediately call the bank and hastily unfreeze the account to smooth everything over and make the problem disappear as quickly and painlessly as possible, reverting to my old habits. But another stronger, more resolute voice inside me, one that sounded remarkably like Harold's firm yet gentle whisper of encouragement, told me clearly, "You deserve so much better than this, Anna. You have endured enough. Don't back down now, not after everything you've been through." Instead of immediately responding to Mark's increasingly urgent and panicked text message, I made a crucial and deliberate decision. I called Richard, the trusted financial advisor, whom Harold and I had worked with together for many years, a man I respected and trusted implicitly. I knew, with absolute clarity, that I needed to fully understand my exact financial standing, my options, and my legal rights before I could possibly face the inevitable storm and confrontation I knew was rapidly approaching, gathering force. "Anna, it's wonderful to hear from you again, but it's certainly been far too long," Richard said warmly and genuinely when we met in the comfortable, familiar surroundings of his office later that same afternoon. He looked at me kindly. "How have things truly been?" Taking a deep, steadying breath, I began to recount everything, detailing the complex and painful sequence of events that had transpired over the past several years. The heartbreaking and difficult decision to sell our beloved family home. The secret, consistent, and substantial mortgage payments I had been diligently making for them. Wendy's increasingly hurtful, manipulative, and cruel behavior towards me, and my recent decisive action to freeze the account that had funded their lifestyle. As I spoke, detailing years of quiet sacrifice, unspoken generosity, and simmering resentment, Richard listened intently and patiently, occasionally nodding his head and in understanding or making a note on his pad. When I finally finished my detailed account, feeling emotionally drained, he slowly removed his glasses, gently rubbing the bridge of his nose, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Anna," he said softly, his voice filled with genuine concern, and compassion. Do you truly realize, have you ever stopped to calculate just how much you have generously given them? How much financial support you've actually provided over the past 5 years, alone since Harold passed? When he then calmly presented me with the precise, staggering figure calculated down to the last dollar, I actually felt physically lightheaded and faint with shock and utter disbelief. Between the significant value of the house I had sold, the continuous, relentless mortgage payments I had made, month after month, and other various loans and financial assistance I had quietly provided that had clearly never been repaid or even properly acknowledged, I had in essence given Mark and Wendy nearly $450,000 of my own money. This was money that was explicitly and solely intended to secure my own retirement, to fund those very trips Harold and I had always lovingly planned to take together in our golden years, a future we had dreamed of sharing. Richard, I asked quietly, trying desperately to keep my voice steady and composed despite the shock, what exactly are my options at this point in time? Where do I stand? Legally, Anna, you are absolutely within your rights to stop making these payments immediately. Richard explained clearly, concisely, and reassuringly. Your name is not on their mortgage. You have no legal obligation to pay it. You have been making these payments entirely voluntarily, out of pure generosity and love. And financially? I pressed further, needing to fully understand my own personal position and security. Where does this decision, the decision to stop supporting them, leave me now looking forward? Richard patiently ran the updated numbers based on my current asset savings and estimated expenses. He confirmed, much to my relief, that if I stopped supporting Mark and Wendy financially, I would still have sufficient funds to live comfortably and securely in my apartment, and could even afford to take some modest trips, perhaps the very ones I had only dared to dream of before this point. It wouldn't necessarily be the lavish, completely worry-free retirement Harold and I had initially envisioned and planned for, but it would certainly be significantly better, more secure, and more comfortable than continuing to rapidly drain my remaining savings at an alarming rate simply to support their chosen lifestyle. Anna, Richard said gently, his voice kind and empathetic, Harold would wholeheartedly want you to prioritize taking care of yourself now. That is what he would have wanted above all else. As I left his office building later that day, walking out into the afternoon sun, I felt a strange, complex, and conflicting mix of lingering guilt and a burgeoning, powerful sense of liberation. For the very first time in what felt like countless lost years, I was consciously and deliberately choosing to put myself first, to prioritize my own well-being, my own future security, and my own happiness. It felt simultaneously terrifying and absolutely, fundamentally necessary. That same evening, my friend Patricia invited me to join her for dinner with some of the other wonderful women from our old neighborhood group friends I hadn't seen regularly in years. I hesitated for a moment. Social gatherings had become increasingly rare for me, as Wendy had so effectively, subtly, and gradually isolated me from my long-standing support network. But I ultimately decided to go, viewing it as a small but significant act of defiance and much-needed self-care. The restaurant was warm and inviting, filled with the cheerful chatter of friends happily reconnecting and enjoying each other's company. Susan, Jean, and Margaret greeted me with warm, genuine hugs and heartfelt smiles, their familiar faces a welcome comfort after years of limited contact and reduced connection. We've genuinely missed you so incredibly much, Anna, Susan said sincerely, her voice full of warmth and affection. We honestly tried calling you so many times over the years, inviting you to things, but we could never reach you. Wendy usually answered the phone whenever we called. Jean added cautiously, a slight frown creasing her brow, a hint of suspicion in her voice. She always told us you were either simply too busy to talk at that moment, or conveniently not feeling well enough for visitors. I nearly choked on the water I was sipping, utterly stunned by this revelation. What I never ever received any of those messages. Not a single one of them. The women exchanged knowing and understanding glances amongst themselves, clearly having suspected something was wrong for a long time. We strongly suspected as much was happening. Anna, Margaret said softly, her voice full of deep understanding and compassion, confirming my worst fears. The few times we did manage to see you, you seemed so different, somehow so withdrawn and quiet, almost afraid. As dinner progressed, I listened, my heart aching with a deep, heavy sadness, as I learned precisely how Wendy had systematically and deliberately cut me off from my dear loyal friends. She had intentionally intercepted phone calls politely, but firmly declined invitations on my behalf without my knowledge or consent, and even spread subtle, insidious rumors suggesting that I was becoming increasingly difficult, demanding, and unstable after Harold's death, all incredibly, while I was quietly and generously funding her comfortable lifestyle and that of her family. Anna, Patricia said, reaching across the table to gently squeeze my hand, her eyes filled with genuine compassion and understanding, offering a lifeline of support. You desperately need to know deep in your heart that you are not alone in this difficult situation. We are all here for you, genuinely and unconditionally ready to support you. For the very first time since I had made the difficult and life-altering decision to freeze the bank account, I felt a deep sense of conviction and quiet confidence in my actions. These women, my true loyal and supportive friends, saw me clearly for who I truly was, flaws and all, and genuinely valued my presence and my friendship in their lives. The stark and painful contrast with Wendy's calculating, manipulative, and cruel treatment could not have been more apparent or deeply felt. My phone buzzed relentlessly and persistently throughout dinner, a constant stream of incoming calls and unread messages demanding my attention. There were 3 missed calls from Mark, too. From Wendy, each individual vibration, a small, annoying demand for my immediate attention and a sign of the storm brewing. I deliberately silenced it consciously, pushing the glowing screen face down on the table, deciding to ignore it completely. Whatever storm was brewing, whatever urgent demands awaited could certainly wait until the morning. I deserved this evening of peace and connection. When I returned home to the quiet solitude of my apartment later that evening, feeling a sense of calm, I discovered 6 new voicemails waiting for me, blinking on my phone screen. I cautiously played the first one. It was from Mark, his voice sounding confused, worried, and slightly panicked. "Mom, please call me back as soon as you get this message, as quickly as you can. There seems to be some kind of major issue with the bank account, and the mortgage payment didn't go through today, as it was supposed to." The second message, also from Mark, sounded significantly more urgent, stressed, and clearly upset. "Mom, seriously, this really isn't funny at all. We really need to talk about this account and this payment right now. Wendy is completely freaking out about the payment not going through. She's in hysterics." The third message was from Wendy herself, her voice initially sickeningly sweet and falsely concerned, an obvious act, but with an undeniable undercurrent of rising panic and anger. "Anna dear, there appears to be some kind of minor confusion or simple oversight with the bank regarding the mortgage payment. Could you please call us back immediately so we can quickly sort this out together, please?" By the time I listened to the 6th and final message, all pretense of politeness Sweetness or false concern from Wendy had completely vanished, replaced by raw fury. Her voice was shrill, laced with venomous anger and uncontrolled fury. If you, for even 1 second, think you can just deliberately cut us off financially without suffering any consequences whatsoever, you are far more senile, out of touch with reality, and utterly clueless than I ever thought possible. Call us back right now, this instant. With a quiet sigh that carried the weight of years of suppressed frustration, I deleted all the messages from my voicemail without listening to them again, and calmly turned off my phone, completely putting it out of sight. Tomorrow would be more than soon enough perfectly sufficient time to face them, their manufactured crisis, and the inevitable confrontation. That night, finally, free from the incessant buzzing demands of my phone, free from the heavy weight of their expectations, their manipulations, and their sense of entitlement, I slept better and more deeply than I had in years, a truly deep, peaceful, and restful sleep that felt incredibly liberating. In the morning, I woke up feeling strangely calm, peaceful, and centered, a quiet sense of unwavering resolve settling over me, solidifying my determination. I made myself a fresh hot cup of coffee, walked slowly to the living room window, and deliberately opened the curtains wide to let in the cheerful, bright spring sunshine, a symbol of new beginnings. Then, with a profound sense of purpose and clarity, I called my lawyer's office, scheduling an appointment. I need to understand precisely where I stand, legally speaking, regarding my financial situation and my past support. I explained calmly to his assistant, then to the lawyer himself, when he called me back detailing the entire complex and difficult situation. And, I added firmly, my voice resolute, I also want to make significant and immediate changes to my will. By noon, I had a crystal-clear understanding of my legal rights and obligations, a well-defined and strategic plan for moving forward, for protecting myself, my assets, and my future security. I cautiously turned my phone back on, bracing myself, and was immediately bombarded with notifications, 15 missed calls, mostly from Mark and Wendy, and a new text message from Mark appearing at the top of the list. It simply read, "We're coming over. Be there in 20 minutes. My heart rate picked up slightly, a natural reaction to the impending confrontation, but I took a deep, steadying breath, reminding myself of my resolve. I straightened my shoulders, walked over to the mantel, and looked up at the framed photograph of Harold, his warm smile and reassuring eyes offering a sense of quiet strength. "Wish me strength, my love," I whispered softly to his image, feeling his presence there with me. Just then, the doorbell rang its familiar chime, announcing the arrival of the inevitable confrontation. The moment of truth I had been calmly preparing for had finally arrived at my doorstep. When I opened the door to my apartment, the very first thing I noticed, the most striking thing, was Wendy's face, flushed an angry, furious red. Her usually carefully applied makeup seemed utterly unable to conceal the raw fury, and barely contained rage blazing intensely in her eyes directed squarely at me. Mark stood slightly behind her, looking visibly uncomfortable, awkward, and out of place. His gaze fixed somewhere vaguely over my shoulder, seemingly unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. "What in the name of hell do you think you are doing, Anna?" Wendy demanded immediately, her voice sharp, aggressive, and accusatory, shoving rudely past me into the apartment's small entryway, without waiting for even a semblance of an invitation to enter my home. I closed the door slowly and calmly behind her, deliberately taking my time, surprising even myself with the unexpected level of my own composure and stillness in the face of her aggression. "Hello to you too, Wendy. Hello, Mark," I replied evenly, my voice steady and controlled, refusing to be drawn into her immediate anger. "Mom, There's been some sort of mistake with the bank account," Mark said hesitantly, his voice uncertain, slightly strained, and clearly uncomfortable. "The mortgage payment didn't go through today, and we don't understand why." "It wasn't a mistake, Mark," I stated quietly, my voice calm, deliberate, and firm, leaving no room for misinterpretation. "I froze the account. I did it intentionally." The silence that followed my simple, clear statement was absolute and profound, truly deafening in its intensity filled with shock. Wendy's mouth opened and closed wordlessly several times, like a startled fish suddenly pulled gasping for air out of water, while Mark looked genuinely and utterly confused, his brow furrowed in bewilderment. "What account?" He finally managed to stammer out his voice, barely a hushed whisper, filled with confusion and disbelief. "What mortgage payment are you even talking about, Mom?" The dawning, painful realization hit me then sharp and sudden, like a physical blow directly to the chest. He truly, genuinely didn't know. After all these years of my silent sacrifice, after all my quiet support, Mark had absolutely no idea, not even the slightest clue, that I had been consistently making their monthly mortgage payments for them all this time. Wendy, however, recovered her composure with remarkable speed and agility, her initial shock instantly giving way to indignant bluster, a practiced performance. "Your mother is clearly being ridiculous, Mark." She snapped, her voice dripping with false concern and outright dismissal of my words. "She's obviously confused about something, perhaps misremembering things." "I am not confused at all, Wendy," I said, my voice gaining strength, conviction, and clarity with each word I spoke, feeling steadier and more grounded than I had expected to be. "For the past 4 years, ever since you bought this house, I have been quietly and consistently paying your mortgage. Every single month, precisely $2,300, the full amount has been automatically transferred directly from my bank account to yours to cover your mortgage payment for this house you live in." Mark turned his gaze sharply and intently towards Wendy, his expression rapidly shifting from initial confusion to profound shock, disbelief, and hurt. Is this actually true, Wendy?" he asked, his voice strained, his eyes searching her face for the truth. "Of course it's not true, darling," Wendy scoffed dismissively, tossing her hair back with a defiant, dismissive air, a clear attempt to brush off the accusation. But her eyes darted nervously around the room, unable to settle pointedly and deliberately, avoiding Mark's direct, piercing gaze, a clear sign of her deceit. "Your mother is simply getting things completely mixed up, confusing details," she insisted weakly. With a newfound sense of purpose and determination, I walked deliberately and calmly to my small desk situated in the corner of the living room and retrieved the carefully organized folder my lawyer had helped me prepare just that morning, anticipating this exact confrontation. It contained irrefutable proof, concrete documentation, bank statements, clearly showing the regular, consistent transfers, detailed transaction records, itemizing each payment, everything meticulously documenting years of consistent and hidden financial support. "Here," I said, extending the folder towards Mark, presenting him with the undeniable truth. "See for yourself. Look through these papers carefully." Mark slowly sank onto my sofa, his face visibly pale, clearly reeling from the shock, and began slowly flipping through the documents, his disbelief and pain growing with each page he examined. There it was, clearly documented month after month like clockwork, the identical recurring amount transferred from my account to theirs, consistently labeled in the transaction details as mortgage payment. There were additional transfers clearly marked for property taxes, necessary home repairs, even specific fees for the children's private school activities and various expensive extracurriculars. "Wendy?" Mark's voice was barely above a hushed, broken whisper, filled with a raw mixture of deep hurt, profound betrayal, and utter disbelief. Did you actually know about all of this financial support? All these payments?" Wendy's strategy shifted instantly and dramatically, adapting with remarkable speed and practiced ease. Suddenly, tears welled up in her eyes, appearing almost on command, a performance for Mark's benefit. "Of course I knew, darling," she said, her voice suddenly soft, trembling, and attempting to sound vulnerable, trying to elicit sympathy. She reached out a hand towards Mark's, a gesture of false comfort and manipulation. "Your mother simply offered to help us out when your business was really struggling, financially when things were tough." She paused, looking at him with feigned innocence. "It was her idea entirely, darling. She wanted to help." "To help temporarily, Wendy," I clarified calmly, cutting through her revised narrative, not allowing her to casually rewrite history or distort the truth. "Not indefinitely, not forever, and certainly not while I was being treated like an unwelcome, inconvenient guest in your lives, systematically and deliberately cut off from my own family and friends by you. That is just not fair at all." "Anna?" Wendy protested vehemently, her voice rising, but her words lacked conviction, her carefully constructed act slipping slightly under the pressure. "Not fair." I echoed, feeling years of suppressed anger, deep hurt, and quiet resentment finally begin to surface, uncontrollably bubbling up within me like a raging storm. What is truly not fair, Wendy is being callously, cruelly, and publicly called a useless burden by the very woman whose comfortable lifestyle and very home I have been quietly, secretly, and consistently funding for years on end. Mark looked up from the damning papers, his face deathly pale, his eyes wide with shock, pain, and a horrifying realization. "Mom, I honestly had absolutely no idea about any of this, not the slightest clue." He looked genuinely devastated and blindsided. I truly thought that specific account, the one the money came from, was just set up for occasional emergencies, for unexpected large expenses that might come up." He shook his head slowly, pain etched on his face. "I never ever knew you were making our regular monthly mortgage payments for us." "Mark?" I asked gently, my voice softening slightly, as I saw his genuine shock and the depth of his hurt, realizing he truly was unaware. "How could you possibly not know something so fundamental, so crucial, so significant to your financial life, to the roof over your head?" "Wendy handles all of our finances, Mom," he explained haltingly, turning to look at his wife with new critical and deeply hurt eyes, seeing her perhaps clearly and truthfully for the very first time. You told me repeatedly, Wendy, that we were managing everything perfectly well on our own, that there were no major financial issues." Wendy's demeanor underwent yet another rapid, dramatic transformation. The tears, which had momentarily dried up when they weren't serving their purpose, now flowed freely and copiously again, seemingly on cue, a performance for Mark's benefit. "I was just desperately trying to protect you from all the unnecessary stress, darling," she sobbed dramatically, reaching out again for Mark's hand, her lower lip trembling theatrically, a picture of feigned vulnerability. "You were working so incredibly hard back then, and your mother genuinely, truly wanted to help us out financially." She looked at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. I honestly didn't think all the specific financial details mattered that much in the grand scheme of things, that they were important enough to burden you with. The blatant manipulation in her performance was so transparent, so utterly lacking in any genuine sincerity that I almost found myself admiring her sheer audacity and skill at performing such an elaborate act. But this time, unlike perhaps in the past, Mark wasn't falling for her carefully crafted act. His eyes were finally open. "The details," he repeated incredulously, his voice rising with disbelief, hurt and growing anger. "My mother has been consistently supporting our entire lifestyle for years, essentially paying for the roof over our heads, funding our home, and you honestly didn't think that was an important, critical, and essential detail to share with me, your husband. Well, you've been treating her like... Wendy began attempting to shift the blame back onto me, but she struggled to find the words to justify her behavior. "Like a burden, Mark." I finished the sentence for him quietly, my voice firm and steady, stating the undeniable truth. "Like someone who no longer matters, whose presence is merely an inconvenience to be tolerated or avoided." "That is simply not true. Mark," Wendy insisted loudly, her voice rising in pitch and volume, the tears now flowing even more copiously down her face, a full performance designed solely for Mark's benefit and sympathy. "I have always respected Anna. I have always treated her with dignity. Calling someone a useless burden at their very own birthday party right in front of their friends and family is certainly an interesting and rather unique form of demonstrating respect. Wouldn't you agree, Wendy?" I said dryly, my patience finally wearing thin, refusing to engage further with her blatant lies. Mark stood up abruptly from the sofa, running both hands agitatedly through his hair, his frustration, shock, and internal turmoil palpable in the air around him. I just cannot believe any of this is actually happening right now. It feels unreal." He looked at me, then back at Wendy, pain in his eyes. "Pain in. All those times you deliberately told me Mom was too busy to come over, or that she had canceled plans with us unexpectedly. Was any of that ever actually true, Wendy? Or were you just lying to me, deliberately keeping us apart, manipulating our relationships?" Wendy offered no immediate answer, her prolonged silence in response a clear and undeniable admission of her guilt and deceit, and the kids' grandparents' day event at school last year. Mark continued, the full horrifying realization dawning on him, connecting all the fragmented pieces of the puzzle, seeing the pattern of her manipulation clearly. "Mom asked me specifically why Emma didn't invite her, but you told me, Wendy, that Mom had already politely declined the invitation because she wasn't feeling well enough to attend." I felt a painful, familiar lump forming in my throat, remembering my genuine hurt and disappointment at not receiving an invitation, completely unaware that Wendy had deliberately kept it from me and fabricated a polite refusal in my name, lying to both of us. The silence in the room that followed his painful realization was thick, heavy, and suffocating, laden with the weight of years, perhaps even decades, of carefully constructed lies, deliberate deception, and painful emotional manipulation, slowly and irrevocably unraveling before our eyes. Mark looked back and forth between Wendy and me, his eyes wide with a raw mixture of pain and understanding, as if he were truly seeing us both clearly, truthfully, and without the veil of deception for the very first time in his adult life. We need to somehow fix this situation, Mom." He finally murmured, his voice filled with raw emotion, deep regret, and profound sadness. "We will find a way somehow to pay you back every single penny, Mom. Every last cent." He looked at me with earnest sincerity. "And I promise you, I swear it, things will fundamentally change in how we treat you from now on. This will not continue." "Mark, it's honestly not about the money anymore," I said softly, my voice gentle but firm, conveying the deeper truth of the situation. "Not now, not after everything. It's about respect, about being valued and truly appreciated for who I am as a person, for my love and my presence, for more than just my checkbook, or the financial help I can provide you with. I know, Mom." He said, his voice heavy with genuine remorse, deep shame and pain. "And I am so incredibly sorry, Mom, truly sorry, that I was so blind for so long, that I didn't see what was happening, what she was doing right in front of me all these years." Wendy's dramatic flow of tears had dried up remarkably quickly once she realized they were no longer serving her purpose, no longer effectively manipulating Mark or eliciting the desired sympathy. "This entire conversation is absolutely absurd," she snapped angrily, her voice sharp and accusatory, turning her frustration onto both of us. "You are both completely overreacting to one small, insignificant comment I made at a party. Does that one little comment, that one phrase, suddenly erase everything I have done for this family, over the years, all my contributions? What exactly have you done for this family, Wendy?" Mark asked her quietly, his voice dangerously low-controlled and filled with cold fury, his gaze steady and unwavering, challenging her claims. "Besides spending my mother's hard-earned money, funding our lives, and deliberately keeping her from her own grandchildren, and from me." The look Wendy then shot me was pure, unadulterated venom, a chilling expression of raw hatred and malice that sent a shiver down my spine. "You will deeply regret this, Anna," she hissed through clenched teeth, her voice a low, menacing growl, making a clear threat. "Both of you, Mark and Anna, will regret this day and what you have done." Without another word, she spun around dramatically, her movement sharp and abrupt, and stormed out of my apartment, slamming the door violently shut behind her, the loud sound echoing ominously in the sudden heavy silence that remained. Mark and I stood in the quiet aftermath for a long, tense moment, the lingering tension from the confrontation slowly dissipating, but leaving a heavy, uncomfortable silence in its wake, the air thick with unspoken emotions and the weight of what had just transpired. "Mom," he finally murmured, running a trembling hand through his hair, looking visibly lost, shaken, and deeply hurt. I just don't even know what to say right now, how to process any of this. I feel like I've been living in a fog, completely blind, utterly unaware of the truth for so long. We both have been, Mark," I admitted softly, my voice filled with understanding compassion and a touch of profound sadness for the lost years and the pain we had both endured. "But now at least our eyes are finally open. We are seeing clearly." As Mark quietly left my apartment shortly after needing to go and deal with the immediate fallout and the inevitable chaos Wendy would undoubtedly create in her fury, I knew with absolute certainty that this confrontation, while necessary, was only the very beginning of a long and challenging process. The storm was far from over. It had just escalated. But for the very first time in what felt like an eternity, a long dark period, a sense of something I hadn't truly felt since Harold's passing slowly stirred and awakened within me, a fragile but undeniable flicker of hope for the future, a possibility of healing and new beginnings. The entire week following my incredibly difficult, painful, and dramatic confrontation with both Mark and Wendy was eerily quiet and unnervingly silent. There were no angry, demanding phone calls constantly ringing, no unexpected, unwelcome visits at my door, just a profound, unsettling, and almost suffocating silence. I tried desperately to convince myself that this silence was a positive sign, that perhaps they were both taking the necessary time and space, retreating to process the immense weight of everything that had been revealed and the magnitude of the situation. But despite my best efforts to be optimistic, a tight, anxious knot seemed to tighten progressively in my stomach. With each passing silent day, the uncertainty weighing heavily on me. Then late on Thursday afternoon, my doorbell unexpectedly and startlingly rang, breaking the silence. When I cautiously opened the door, my heart pounding slightly with apprehension, I found my 16-year-old granddaughter, Emma, standing alone on my doorstep. Her backpack was slung loosely over one shoulder, and her eyes were visibly red-rimmed and puffy clearly from crying. "Emma. Sweetheart, what in the world is wrong? What's happened?" I asked immediately, my voice filled with immediate concern and a deep sense of worry for her. With a heart-wrenching sob, she fell immediately into my outstretched arms, her slender young body shaking uncontrollably with distress and sadness. "Everything is just awful right now, Grandma," she whispered between gasps for air, her voice choked with emotion. "Mom and Dad, they won't stop fighting all the time every single day." I gently ushered her inside my apartment, leading her calmly to the kitchen table and made her a warm, comforting cup of hot chocolate, preparing it exactly the way I used to when she was a little girl, a small familiar comfort from happier times. I sat and simply listened patiently as she bravely poured out the story of the chaos, the emotional turmoil, and the constant tension of the past difficult week at their house, detailing the arguments and the upset. "Mom is just furious constantly, Grandma." Emma explained, her small hands tightly wrapped around the warm mug, drawing comfort from its heat, a small island of warmth in her storm. "She keeps saying truly awful and untrue things. Grandma telling Dad that you have deliberately turned him against her, that you are actively and intentionally trying to break up our family on purpose." She looked up at me, then her eyes, so strikingly similar to Mark's, filled with a desperate hope for reassurance and truth. "But that's not actually true at all, is it, Grandma? You wouldn't do that, would you?" "No, honey, it's not true at all," I said gently, reaching out across the table to take one of her small hands in mine, offering comfort and connection. I simply couldn't continue pretending that everything was okay anymore, when it clearly and undeniably wasn't, when there was so much hurt and deceit. I paused carefully, choosing my words. I had to finally be honest about the situation, about what was happening. Emma nodded thoughtfully, slowly absorbing my words and understanding. "I always kind of wondered deep down why you stopped coming around to visit us as much as you used to, why we didn't see you for holidays." She looked down, a touch of sadness in her voice. "Mom always had some kind of ready excuse, but it never really made complete sense to me. It felt off." My heart ached with a deep sadness and regret at the painful realization of just how much I had truly missed in their young lives. How many precious moments had been lost because of Wendy's deliberate interference and manipulation, important dance recitals, significant school events, countless everyday moments, and simple joys that should have been shared with their grandmother. Moments that were stolen from us. "I wanted to be there, Emma," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion, tears threatening to spill. "More than anything else in the world, I wanted to be a part of those moments, those milestones in your lives." "I know, Grandma," she said, surprising me with her maturity, perceptiveness, and empathy for her young age. "Dad told us everything after you left that day after he came home from your apartment." She took a deep breath. "He told us about how you've been helping us financially all these years, about selling your house for us, about the mortgage, and about what Mom said to you on your birthday. How cruel she was. Or She looked down at the table, her expression filled with genuine shame and regret. I should have said something right then, Grandma, that night, when she said that awful thing to you. Tears welled in her eyes again. I am so sorry that I just sat there silently. I squeezed her hand gently, offering comfort, understanding, and immediate forgiveness. You are only 16 years old, Emma, I said softly, emphasizing her youth and vulnerability. It was absolutely not your responsibility to intervene or try to protect me in that situation. That was entirely a matter between the adults involved. Mom has been saying truly awful and untrue things about you to everyone she knows in town. Emma continued, her voice hardening slightly with indignation and a sense of injustice. She's talking to Aunt Sarah, to all the neighbors. She's even telling lies to my friends' parents about you twisting the truth completely. She looked up, her eyes resolute and determined. That's why I decided to come here, Grandma, right after school. I just couldn't stand listening to her say those terrible things about you anymore. Couldn't bear to hear her lie. She paused. She doesn't even know I'm here with you right now. Just as she finished speaking, as if on cue, my phone rang loudly. It was Mark calling, his name appearing on the screen. I quickly answered, hearing the unmistakable sound of raw panic, worry, and desperation in his voice. Mom, is Emma with you right now? Please tell me she's with you. She didn't come home from school and we can't find her anywhere. We've looked everywhere. Yes, Mark, she's here with me, absolutely safe. I quickly reassured him, my own voice shaking slightly from the sudden rush of adrenaline and concern. She's perfectly fine, just a little upset. His palpable relief was immediately evident in his voice as he let out a shaky, audible breath, the tension temporarily easing. Oh, thank God, Mom. Thank you. He paused, then his voice became serious again, heavy with the weight of difficult news. Mom, Wendy is filing for divorce. The news, while perhaps not entirely unexpected given the recent turmoil, the fighting and the revelations still managed to shock me deeply nonetheless. Oh, Mark, I am so very sorry to hear that news, genuinely. I said sincerely, my heart aching for him and the children. Don't be sorry, Mom. He replied, his voice sounding somehow stronger, more resolute, and more determined than I had heard it in years, accepting the difficult reality. It's honestly been a long time coming, a necessary step that we had to take eventually. I was too blind to see it clearly until now, too caught up in everything. After we hung up the phone, Emma and I spent the rest of the evening together, quietly looking through old family photo albums scattered around the living room. I showed her pictures of Mark when he was a little boy, his mischievous smile, and shared cherished, heartwarming stories about her grandfather Harold, filling in the significant gaps in her family history and her understanding of him that Wendy had seemingly tried to erase, minimize, or simply ignore. Around 8 o'clock that evening, Mark arrived at my apartment to pick up Emma. He looked utterly exhausted, lines of stress clearly etched around his eyes, visibly worn down by the week's events, but he also seemed strangely lighter, as if a tremendous heavy burden, a weight he had been carrying for years, had finally been lifted from his shoulders. When Emma quietly excused herself to go to the bathroom, giving us a moment alone, he turned to me, his voice low, serious and filled with pain. Mom, he said, his gaze holding mine. Wendy has been deliberately and actively lying to everyone we know, everyone in town. He took a deep breath. She's been telling people you're becoming senile or losing your mind, that you're somehow trying to manipulate and control me with your money to make me leave her to break up our family. He ran a weary, frustrated hand through his hair, a gesture of despair and helplessness. And And some people are actually believing her lies and gossip. And you, Mark? I asked softly, my voice gentle but serious, a sudden unexpected fear gripping my heart, needing to know where he stood. What do you believe, my son? Mom, I am seeing everything now clearly for the very first time in years. He set his gaze, steady, sincere, and filled with conviction. I let her come between us, Mom. I let her deliberately isolate you from me and from the kids, preventing us from seeing you, from being a family. He looked at me with profound regret in his eyes. I am so incredibly sorry for everything, Mom. Truly, deeply sorry for letting this happen. His heartfelt apology, so sincere and raw, felt like a healing balm applied gently to years of accumulated hurt, pain, and unspoken sadness, a genuine and significant step towards reconciliation and rebuilding our relationship. But I knew with a deep certainty that despite this apology, we still had a very long, challenging, and difficult road ahead of us to truly repair the significant damage that had been done and to rebuild trust. Just 2 days later, my 14-year-old grandson, Tyler, unexpectedly showed up at my door right after school. His presence a welcome surprise. Dad said it was okay if I came over, Grandma, he explained quietly, shuffling his feet nervously on the welcome mat, his eyes questioning and unsure. Is that all right with you, Grandma? Can I stay for a bit? I welcomed him inside with wide open arms, overflowing with pure joy and gratitude at having another precious opportunity to begin rebuilding our relationship, one that had been strained, limited, and controlled by Wendy's pervasive influence and manipulation. Unlike his older sister, Emma, Tyler was much quieter, more reserved, and less openly emotional about the difficult situation at home. But I could clearly see the visible relief in his eyes, the easing of tension in his body, at being in my peaceful, calm environment, away from the constant tension arguments and fighting at his house. The children's visits, slowly but surely, became a regular occurrence. A bright, comforting spot, a beacon of hope in the gathering storm that I knew was still brewing. Because Wendy, true to her manipulative nature, was indeed actively gathering a storm of malicious gossip, false accusations, and twisted rumors about me, spreading them throughout the community. Patricia called me one evening, her voice tight with suppressed anger, frustration, and concern for me. Anna, she said, her voice gentle but firm, relaying the unpleasant news. I honestly don't quite know how to tell you this, delicately or gently, but Wendy has been actively and viciously spreading vicious, nasty rumors all over town about you. She paused, clearly upset. She's telling everyone who will listen that you deliberately cut them off financially as a calculated and malicious way to manipulate Mark into finally leaving her and divorcing her. I sighed softly, feeling the familiar sting of hurt and injustice, though I wasn't entirely surprised by Wendy's predictable and malicious actions. It was exactly the kind of behavior I had come to expect. How many people, Patricia, I asked wearily, my voice heavy with resignation, are actually believing her version of events, her carefully constructed lies? Some people are, Anna, Patricia admitted honestly, her voice filled with disappointment and a touch of sadness that anyone would believe such things. But thankfully, others, many others, are beginning to see right through her carefully constructed act and her transparent lies, especially after that embarrassing scene she made at the school fundraiser event last week. Apparently, Wendy had caused a significant and public disturbance at the event, openly and loudly accusing me of attempting to steal her beloved children away from her through manipulation. Her dramatic and over-the-top performance might perhaps have been more convincing if Emma hadn't been present at the time to calmly, clearly and bravely contradict her mother's wild and untrue claims, calmly telling everyone within earshot exactly what her mother had said to me on my 60th birthday, putting the entire difficult situation into stark and undeniable perspective for the attendees. Mark called me later that same night sounding utterly drained, exhausted, and overwhelmed by the ongoing drama. Wendy is now demanding the house in the divorce settlement. Mom. He told me quietly, his voice heavy with fatigue and stress. The very house that you so generously helped us buy with your money, the house you sacrificed your own home for. Mark, what? What will you do now about the house, about the settlement? I asked, my heart aching for him and the difficult, challenging battle he faced ahead. I'll fight, Mom, he said simply, his voice filled with a new quiet determination and resolve that I hadn't heard before. Not just for the house itself, but more importantly, much more importantly for the kids, for their stability and future. I've let her control our lives and my life for far too long now. That ends now today. The very next day, an unexpected and surprising ally emerged from the most unlikely and unforeseen place. Wendy's own mother, Eleanor, called me completely out of the blue, a phone call I never anticipated. We had never been particularly close, our relationship cordial but distant. Eleanor lived all the way in Arizona and only visited her daughter's family, rarely making our interactions infrequent. But her phone call stunned me into complete silence with its honesty and directness. Anna, she said without any preamble or small talk whatsoever, her voice serious and sober. I owe you a profound and sincere apology. She paused, taking a deep breath. I have known for years, of course, that my daughter Wendy can be incredibly difficult, challenging and self-centered at times, prone to drama. But I honestly had no idea, not even the slightest inkling of just how badly, how cruelly, and how manipulative she was truly treating you. How she was exploiting your kindness. Eleanor, how did you find out about everything about the full situation? I asked, my voice filled with genuine surprise and a hint of disbelief. Mark called me directly. Anna? She explained, confirming my son's courage and honesty. He felt it was important, necessary, that I heard the complete and unvarnished truth of the situation from him. His perspective before Wendy's undoubtedly twisted, self-serving, and completely false version managed to reach me and color my understanding. Her voice then softened considerably, filled with genuine remorse, sadness, and regret regarding her daughter's behavior. Anna, I promise you, from the bottom of my heart, I raised her better than this. I am truly, deeply, and unequivocally sorry for her behavior and for all the pain, hurt, and difficulty she has caused you over the years. By the end of that difficult and emotionally draining month, the battle lines in the unfolding family drama were clearly and firmly drawn, the sides distinctly separated. On my side stood my beloved son Mark, who had finally found his voice and his strength. My wonderful grandchildren Emma and Tyler, who were bravely navigating a challenging situation. My loyal and supportive circle of friends, who had always been there for me. And surprisingly, Wendy's own mother, Eleanor, who chose truth and decency over blind loyalty. On Wendy's side were those individuals who either blindly believed her carefully constructed lies, her victim narrative, or feared her enough to simply pretend they did, choosing to avoid confrontation and maintain a false peace. As the month of May slowly and gently turned into June, ushering in the summer months, I received a seemingly simple invitation that made me literally catch my breath, with emotion, tears welling up in my eyes. The invitation to Emma's upcoming dance recital, an event I had missed the previous year due to Wendy's interference. The card itself was handwritten by my granddaughter, her neat, familiar script filling the space on the small card with love and anticipation. Dear Grandma, I really, really want you to be there for my recital. It won't be the same without you. Please come. Front row where you truly belong, Grandma. I held the small card tightly to my heart, tears blurring my vision. A wave of profound gratitude, love and hope washing over me. A feeling of being truly seen and wanted. Whatever happened next, whatever further challenges, difficulties, or storms lay ahead in the ongoing divorce and family dynamics, this single moment, this heartfelt invitation from my granddaughter was worth everything I had endured and overcome. It was a symbol of our renewed connection. A year quietly passed by, marked by both significant difficult challenges and unexpected precious joys, a period of healing and rebuilding. The divorce proceedings between Mark and Wendy were finally finalized in November, moving forward much more quickly and smoothly than any of us had initially anticipated, perhaps, because Wendy was eager to move on and reinvent herself. Wendy seemingly eager to immediately reinvent herself as the wronged party, the ultimate victim in the narrative, and paint herself in that light, accepted a settlement agreement that granted Mark primary physical custody of the children, giving him stability and full ownership of the house, provided he could manage to buy out her financial portion of its value within a specified time frame. Mom, I honestly don't know how I am going to manage making these payments all on my own, buying her out and covering the mortgage. Mark confessed to me one evening, his voice filled with genuine worry and uncertainty, as we sat together comfortably on my small apartment balcony, wrapped in sweaters against the crisp autumn air. We were quietly watching the sunset paint the evening sky in brilliant, breathtaking hues of vibrant orange, soft pink, and deep purple. A moment of shared peace. "You will figure it out, Mark," I said confidently, my voice firm, yet reassuring, expressing my belief in his capability. "I know you can do this. You have the strength and the determination." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "The children need stability, a sense of permanence, and a secure home right now, more than anything else in their lives." What I didn't tell him in that specific moment was that I had already proactively spoken with Richard, my trusted financial advisor. The money I had managed to save over the past year by no longer consistently supporting Wendy's often extravagant and irresponsible lifestyle had accumulated quite nicely, providing me with a comfortable cushion. I was in a comfortable financial position to help Mark with the necessary buyout if it proved absolutely necessary and unavoidable for him. But this time, unlike before, it would be structured properly and formally as a clearly documented loan with explicit agreed-upon terms, conditions, and a repayment schedule. No more secret, unspoken, or undefined financial arrangements. No more inadvertently enabling unhealthy behavior or fostering dependency. But Mark, to my immense pride and quiet surprise, found his own inherent strength, capability, and determination. "Mom, I've actively taken on several extra contractor projects to significantly increase my income." He explained, his voice filled with a newfound sense of purpose and resolve. "And honestly, without Wendy's constant irresponsible spending habits and demands for money, I can actually make the numbers work. Now I can manage it financially. I can manage the mortgage payments on my own." He looked at me directly, his eyes shining with a quiet confidence and maturity I hadn't seen in years, a reflection of his personal growth. "Mom," he said, his voice resolute and unwavering, "I want to do this on my own now. I need to prove to myself that I can, that I am capable." I felt a powerful surge of profound pride and love welling up inside me, a warm feeling spreading through my chest. My son was actively reclaiming his independence, his financial autonomy, and his personal dignity. Emma and Tyler visibly flourished and thrived once the pervasive tension, the constant fighting, and the emotional drama at home finally dissipated and were removed from their lives. Emma threw herself into her dance studies with renewed passion, dedication, and focus, achieving new levels of skill artistry and technical proficiency. Tyler, on the other hand, discovered a natural talent and passion for photography, constantly capturing beautiful images of everyday moments and seemingly ordinary things that most people simply overlooked, revealing a keen eye for detail, beauty, and composition in the world around him. They visited me regularly at my apartment, their visits no longer needing to be secretive or involve inventing elaborate excuses to see me. They were free to come whenever they wanted. Wendy eventually moved away from our town and relocated to Chicago, dramatically claiming, to anyone who would listen, that our town had become far too toxic and unbearable for her after what we, meaning Mark and I in her twisted narrative, had supposedly done to her, portraying herself as a wronged victim. She called the children sporadically, at first maintaining some contact, but her interest in them clearly waned further when they consistently refused to take sides against either Mark or me, or be drawn into her drama. By the arrival of spring, her phone calls had dwindled to a mere once a month, then became even less frequent than that, eventually almost stopping entirely. "Grandma," Tyler asked me thoughtfully one sunny Saturday afternoon as we worked together side by side in the small community garden plot I had recently joined, carefully planting vibrant seedlings in the rich soil. Are you sad about Mom?" He hesitated, looking for the right words to express his feelings. "Sad about her leaving us, about her being gone," I clarified, gently pressing a small tomato seedling into the earth, understanding his underlying question. He nodded his young face, serious, thoughtful, and wise, beyond his 14 years, reflecting the difficult experiences he had already navigated. "I am sad about what could have been Tyler," I said slowly and carefully, after considering my answer, wanting to be completely honest, yet gentle with him. "I truly wish with all my heart that we could have had a different, healthier, and more loving relationship with her, but no," I stated clearly and firmly, drawing a distinction. "I am not sad about setting necessary boundaries and reclaiming my own life, my own peace, and my own happiness." Tyler seemed to process my words, absorbing their meaning, his hands continuing to work methodically and diligently, planting the next seedling with quiet focus and concentration. "Dad says you taught him what real strength looks like, Grandma," he said quietly, a simple observation. I blinked back sudden, unexpected tears that welled up in my eyes, deeply touched by his innocent observation and by Mark's words, realizing the impact I had had on my son. "Well, Tyler," I replied softly, a small knowing smile playing gently on my lips, "your dad is actually teaching me a few important things about what real strength looks like himself these days in how he is handling everything." With the significant amount of money I was now actively saving each month, by no longer consistently paying their mortgage or funding their lifestyle, I began actively and eagerly planning the long-anticipated trip to the majestic Grand Canyon, the very trip I had mentioned so hopefully and optimistically during my fateful birthday party conversation a year earlier. Mark, wanting to support me and be involved in this positive step for me, insisted on helping me with all the necessary arrangements, details, and logistics of the trip. "Mom," he said earnestly, his voice full of genuine gratitude, affection, and a desire to give back, "you have spent years supporting, nurturing, and taking care of everyone else in this family. putting yourself last. Please let me do this one thing for you. Let me help make this trip happen. Let me be a part of it." Or ta-da, the trip was scheduled for late September, a perfect time to visit when the peak summer crowds would have largely thinned out, allowing for a more peaceful experience, but comfortably, before the sharp chill of winter began to set in. As the departure date drew nearer, with each passing day, my excitement and anticipation grew exponentially. I bought a new compact digital camera to capture the stunning landscapes and breathtaking views, comfortable sturdy hiking shoes to explore the numerous trails along the rim, and the perfect wide-brimmed hat to shield my face from the strong desert sun. Just 1 week before I was scheduled to finally depart for my trip ready for adventure, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened the door, my heart filled with warmth. I found Emma and Tyler standing there on my doorstep, both wearing identical wide grins, their faces beaming, and holding a large, awkwardly wrapped package carefully between them. "What in the world is all this?" I asked, my voice filled with surprised delight and happy curiosity as they practically bustled into my apartment, barely containing their obvious excitement and enthusiasm. "It's an early birthday present, Grandma," Emma announced brightly, practically bouncing on the balls of her feet with excitement. "Since you'll be away at the Grand Canyon for your actual birthday this year, we wanted you to have something special beforehand. My next birthday, my 61st, would indeed fall right in the middle of my planned trip, a fact they had remembered." I carefully began unwrapping the large package my curiosity genuinely piqued, wondering what they had chosen. Inside, after peeling away layers of wrapping paper, I discovered a beautiful leather-bound travel journal, remarkably similar in style and appearance to the one Mark had given me the previous year, but with one incredibly significant, touching, and deeply meaningful difference. This journal was already partially filled, not with blank pages, but with handwritten notes, cherished photographs, and carefully placed mementos. "Open it, Grandma. Look inside, quick," Tyler urged excitedly, practically vibrating with anticipation, eager for me to see their gift. Inside the front cover and on the initial pages, I found page after page of meticulously handwritten notes, carefully drawn maps of potential destinations, small faded photographs, and collected memories, little pieces of our family history and shared dreams. The children had clearly spent significant time, effort, and love gathering stories and pictures from my friends about the cherished trips Harold and I had always dreamed of, taking together but never had the chance to, before he passed, exploring the romantic winding streets of Paris, driving along the rugged, beautiful coastline of Maine, wandering through the fragrant purple lavender fields of Provence in France. They had meticulously researched each destination, adding practical tips for future travelers, including details about local customs and attractions, and incorporating meaningful quotes that resonated with themes of adventure exploration and new beginnings. "It's like a road map, Grandma," Emma explained softly, her eyes shining with love, pride, and deep affection for all the amazing, wonderful trips you are going to take from now on, all the places you will see. And we want you to write all about each adventure in it. Grandma, Tyler added, his voice earnest and full of anticipation, so we can read about them when you get back and share the experience, the memories with you. I held the beautifully crafted journal tightly to my heart, completely overwhelmed by the incredible thoughtfulness, the love, and the deep meaning it held. It represented not just their support for my future dreams of travel exploration and happiness, but their deep-seated conviction and confidence that I had many wonderful adventures, rich experiences, and happy moments still ahead of me in life, that my journey was far from over. The day before my scheduled departure for the Grand Canyon, full of excitement and ready for my adventure, Mark hosted a small, intimate gathering at his house. It was truly his house now, a home he had fought for and was proud of, the shadow of Wendy's presence and manipulation no longer lingering heavily or oppressively in its rooms. Patricia, Susan, Jean, and Margaret were all there, their familiar, comforting presence filling the space with warmth and laughter, along with a few newer friends I had made through, working in the community garden, wonderful women who had welcomed me warmly. "A toast, everyone!" Mark announced, raising his glass, his voice full of warmth, pride, and emotion, addressing the small group. "A toast to my mother, Anna Collins, the strongest, most resilient, and most wonderful woman I know." To Anna, everyone present echoed enthusiastically and genuinely, their glasses clinking together in a joyful sound of celebration and support. I looked around at the faces of those who were truly important in my life, those who genuinely loved and cared for me. My son Mark, who had navigated through difficult challenges, faced painful truths, and found his way back to himself, standing tall and independent. My grandchildren Emma and Tyler, who now actively sought out my company, my affection, and my stories, instead of being deliberately kept from me. Dear friends, both old and new, who valued me simply for who I was, my true self, not for what I could provide or do for them. I felt a profound sense of peace, deep contentment, and quiet happiness, washing over me, a feeling of finally being truly seen, accepted, and appreciated for who I was. "I have a toast of my own to make," I said, raising my glass in return, my voice clear, steady, and filled with emotion. "To second chances at life, at happiness, and to the beauty of new beginnings to the future." Later that evening, as the gathering slowly wound down and guests began to depart, offering warm goodbyes and well wishes, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Mark, the house quietening down. He was quietly washing dishes by hand, thoughtfully, refusing my offers to help, insisting I just relax and enjoy the end of the evening. "You know, Mom," he said thoughtfully, drying his hands on a towel, a reflective look on his face, "when you froze that account last year, I was completely shocked, utterly confused, and honestly angry by your actions at the time." He paused, looking at me with newfound understanding in his eyes. "But looking back now, a year later, it was honestly the very best thing that could have possibly happened, Mom, to all of us. It was a painful catalyst, yes, but a necessary one for change, for growth." I leaned comfortably against the kitchen counter, watching my son truly seeing the man he had become, perhaps for the first time in years, independent and strong. "Sometimes, Mark," I replied softly, a small knowing smile on my face, acknowledging the truth of his words. "The hardest and most painful decisions in life, the ones that are the most difficult to make, are the ones that ultimately lead to the greatest freedom, the most profound growth, and the most significant positive change." He nodded in understanding, the realization clear in his eyes, acknowledging the truth of my statement. I only wish I had managed to see the truth sooner, Mom." He looked down, regret evident in his expression. "Before so much time was lost between us, before things got so complicated and painful. Mark," I said softly, my voice filled with compassion, wisdom, and love. "We only truly see things, understand them, and accept them when we are finally ready deep down to see them, not a single moment before, no matter how clear they may be to others." The very next morning, as I calmly and confidently boarded the plane that would carry me away to the first grand adventure of my new independent and self-directed life, I reflected quietly on the entire complex sequence of events that had somehow unexpectedly led me to this precise moment in time. One cruel, cutting comment delivered thoughtlessly at a birthday party. One necessary, decisive action taken in response to that deep pain and realization, followed by a series of difficult, honest, and sometimes painful conversations, and ultimately painful but eye-opening revelations, and a rebuilding of relationships. And now here I was on the cusp of a new beginning, a new chapter, experiencing a profound sense of freedom. It wasn't the lonely, bitter freedom of someone who had angrily cut ties, fueled by resentment, bitterness, or anger. Instead, it was the peaceful, empowering liberation of a woman who finally, after years of sacrifice and putting others first, understood her own inherent worth, her own value, and her own right to happiness. As the plane gracefully lifted into the vast blue sky, ascending steadily above the clouds, leaving the past behind, I opened my beautiful new travel journal, the one filled with love and hope, to the first crisp blank page, and began to write, my pen gliding smoothly across the paper. Today I am precisely where I am meant to be. I was no longer anyone's burden, no longer a supporting character in someone else's story. I was simply Anna, a loving mother, a cherished grandmother, a loyal friend, and at long last, undeniably proudly, and finally, the heroine of my very own unfolding story, ready for whatever came next. Now I am truly curious to hear from you, from those who have taken the time and the kindness to listen to my story, to hear my experience. What would you honestly have done if you had found yourself in a situation similar to mine, facing such a difficult challenge? Have you ever personally experienced something similar to what I went through? A moment of betrayal, a difficult family conflict, or a journey to reclaim your own life? Please share your thoughts, your own experiences, and your perspectives in the comments section down below. I would genuinely love to read them. And meanwhile, for those of you who are interested in hearing more, I am leaving 2 other channel favorite stories displayed on the final screen of this video, stories that are sure to surprise you, perhaps make you think, and hopefully even inspire you with their own unique journeys of resilience and overcoming challenges. Thank you so much for watching and listening until the very end. It truly means a lot to me.